Hey guys, welcome back to another video here on Football Heritage, here with your host Stephen Clark. So today we're going to be wrapping up and kind of reacting to the AFL 2021 first round draft, which just happened tonight. There were a lot of surprises. Obviously we did a kind of predictions video, sort of a phantom draft of the first 20 last night. So I'll be kind of reacting to how we did. I got a couple right, I think about... probably in the range of like that 7 to 10, right? So pretty happy with that. But there were definitely a lot of big surprises as well. A couple guys really bolting up the list, expected to go kind of maybe in the 30s, 40s that made it into that kind of top 15, 20 bracket. So a lot to unpack. Obviously the list managers get to see a lot more of these players. So hopefully they have a bit better of an idea than some of us. So without any further ado, let's get into what we just saw unfold. Obviously, Jason Horne-Francis went as the number one pick, which was very, very well documented. It was well known that North Melbourne weren't going to bid on Nick Dacos. So Jason Horne-Francis going as the number one pick. He's, I think most people would agree, it's him or Dacos is the best player in the draft, with a lot of people leaning towards Horne-Francis because of just the sheer amount of games that he's played at a mature level, whereas Dacos, living in Victoria, has had to kind of miss out. Really exciting prospect, Jason Horne-Francis. I think he's a deserving number one pick, and I think that North Melbourne are just going to have a franchise sort of player for the next 10, 15 years in Horne-Francis, so exciting times for them. The next pick was GWS's pick, and they decided to make a bid for Sam Darcy. Obviously, anyone who's kind of been following the draft up to this point will understand that Sam Darcy is a father-son prospect, meaning that the Western Bulldogs, as his father played for the Western Bulldogs, have the first kind of dibs on him, and they were able to make to match the bid that GWS put ahead and claim Sam Darcy. So Sam Darcy is kind of the most sought-after key forward in the draft. Really interesting that that GWS bid on him above of Dacos. There's a lot of kind of political reasons for that. I'm suspecting that GWS and the Bulldogs still have a bit of a strong rivalry going on due to their kind of prelim a few years back. Probably a lot of dislike between the two camps, so they could have just been trying to screw the Bulldogs over a bit there. Yeah, so next thing that came up was obviously GWS again, now trying to pick, and they did not bid on Dacos again. They decided to go with Finn Callaghan. And this is a great pick as well because, you know, Finn Callaghan is just one of these really smart sort of inside, outside midfielders that kind of is in the Bontempelli mould. And I think GWS have picked up a really great player there. Excited to see what he can bring. Then finally, the Gold Coast had their pick, and they did decide to bid on Nick Dacos, who eventually ended up, as the fourth pick, which to a lot of people might sound crazy, but I guess that's what happens when you know for a fact that Collingwood is going to match that father-son bid, and obviously Nick Dacos goes to Collingwood. So we'll keep a keen eye on his career. You'd expect that he'll be playing sort of, if not week one, he'll be playing a lot next season. So then the Gold Coast used their pick on Mac Andrew. So as a Melbourne fan, I know all about Mac Andrew. He's a youth academy prospect that came up through the Melbourne sort of development. He's a really well sought after tall sort of, he plays his best game in the ruck, but he can play back and forward as well. So he's just one of these guys in that sort of, he's definitely got that sort of Luke Jackson mold where, you know, he wins his own kind of contested possessions. He's pretty silky with his hands, so he's an exciting prospect. Might take a few years to kind of develop fully and build out into his body, but great pick there for Gold Coast. Then we had Josh Rachele being picked up by Adelaide. Rachele's a great player. He looks like he's going to be an absolute gun, kind of as that small forward. He's electric. He's going to add a lot of great options to that attack for Adelaide as they kind of rebuild around him and Thilthorpe, you'd imagine. Moving on, we had Josh Ward. So Josh Ward has gone to Hawthorn, just to clarify. Josh Ward is another really talented midfielder. He's one of the best in the draft, alongside, you know, your Callahans, your Dacos, and your Horne-Francis. Hawthorn have, you know, people have rated this kid as sort of one of the best sort of athletic types. You know, he'll run all day. He's got a great endurance running, as well as the skills, so he can kind of match it all together. So I think Sam Mitchell has going to be really, really happy to see a very similar player to himself picked up as his first draft prospect as Hawthorn coach. So now we move into the first Fremantle pick, which is pick 8, which they used on Jai Amiss, so a key forward from WA, and it was a really great night for WA players. I'll get into that as we kind of continue onwards, but Jai Amiss, great looking kind of key forward. He's done a lot of great work over here in the West, and I think that he'll be really delighted to stay in the West. And Fremantle, this kind of does solve a big problem for them. And if he can turn into a sort of a 10-year player, a 200-game player, Fremantle could be ready for a tilt sooner than we know. Next up was Richmond, and so this is probably the biggest one that I personally got wrong. I didn't expect them to take who they've taken, which is Josh Gibcus. Josh Gibcus being the first on here that is a true out-and-out kind of key defender. It's not that I didn't rate him on talent-wise, it's just that I thought that Richmond might try and focus in on one of these midfielders because there's quite a lot of good midfielders on offer here. So they might try and maybe start to replace the Martin Cochin sort of generation. But interestingly enough, they've decided not to, and they've shored up sort of their backline here. It's a good pick overall. I rate it. I think Josh Gibbs would be good. Just didn't expect it to come this early. Next up here was a pick that kind of shaped the next stage of the draft. So we had Neil Erasmus being picked up by Fremantle. I personally thought he was going to drop a little bit further and maybe the Eagles might pick him up. But it's a great decision here from Fremantle because, he's sort of a different kind of caliber midfielder to what they already have. He's someone who can kind of go forward. He's not that sort of Brayshaw type where he's going to be in and amongst the hard battles, but maybe just waiting outside, waiting for that handball release and then kick inside 50. He looks like he can be a gun, and he's kind of that goal scoring midfield option, in the mold of someone like a Petrarca. So obviously they're going to be hoping that he can have a similar career to that. Long way to go for the young man, but another great WA pick for Fremantle. It seems like they've learnt their lesson from taking Victorian kids. Next up, we had Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera going to St Kilda. Great option. I think we predicted this one, so happy with that. But I think he's going to be an excellent player for St Kilda. He looks like, he's going to be playing on the outside sort of wing. He gets a lot of his possessions uncontested, so he's a guy that finds space and can receive the ball cleanly, then disposes of it. I think he's just going to be able to be one of these movers of the ball for St Kilda. I think St Kilda have looked really good kind of coming up the last few years. Maybe where they struggled this year was, they weren't quick enough. They had someone like Jack Steele that could kind of make the magic happen, but overall just needed a little bit more quality, and that's definitely what Wanganeen-Milera adds, is quality, because he's known as the best kick in this draft. So great pickup for St Kilda. I think they played their hand smartly here. Then was probably the biggest sort of movement in the draft. So what happened was that West Coast were due to have this next pick at 12, and then they swapped with Port Adelaide. So Port Adelaide moved up to 12, and the Eagles moved down to 14. So Port Adelaide used this pick on Josh Sin, so who's kind of like a half-back. He looks like he's going to be a really excellent player, known as one of the fastest, quickest endurance runners again in this draft. Could have been a sort of top 5 pick if it weren't for some injuries during the year. I think they were quite worried that the next pick in this list, Essendon, might have taken him if they hadn't moved up. So they've given up a second round draft pick next year to kind of move up, and I think it's probably worked out pretty well for both parties here. I think Port Adelaide have got their man, and I think he's a kind of player who I think we'll see a lot of next season. I think he could go straight into that team. Then we had Essendon, obviously, who have picked up probably the second biggest slider of the whole draft, which is Ben Hobbs, someone that I expected to definitely go on the top kind of 7, if not 8. He's dropped all the way down to 13 here. Great player, well known as like one of the best characters in the draft in terms of just that leadership kind of role as well. He was a captain for Vic. He's just got, I don't know, you just see him talk. He seems like someone who's very mature. He really wants this. There was some footage of him crying after being drafted, which great to see that kind of emotion come from these guys. They work so hard their whole lives just to get this opportunity. And I think he said his dad was an Essendon fan, so it's worked out pretty good for him in that case as well. And I expect him to have a really good effect on that football club, and I'll be keeping a keen eye on what Ben Hobbs does. So then finally we did have the Eagles pick, which they obviously moved down to at 14. And so probably the biggest story here was that a lot of people would have suspected that at 14 the Eagles would have taken Matthew Johnson, who's sort of one of the best midfielders still available at this point, probably considered by most to be the best midfielder still on the board at this point. Another WA kid, so no problem for the Eagles securing him there. He's already lives here. Would have been quite a simple sort of sell, but in the end they ended up going for Campbell Chesser. So he's another midfielder from Victoria. So obviously their camp has sort of rated him high enough to sort of disregard the Johnson pick here and go with Campbell Chesser, which, you know, could turn out to be wrong, but also could turn out to be a streak of genius. So we'll have to definitely keep an eye on that. I personally like Campbell Chesser. I saw a bit of him sort of reviewing some footage. I think he'll be a kind of good midfielder. I think that's definitely where the Eagles need to tighten the ship. I think their midfield on paper, you know, is great, but hasn't really been performing to the level you'd expect over the last couple of seasons. So I think Campbell Chesser can hopefully add some sort of rejuvenation there. Next was 15, GWS's pick. Some people suspected they might try trade this pick, but they were quite quick in choosing Leek Alia. So this is a great pick. I didn't have this guy in my draft just because I thought that some people might be a bit wary about sort of the mature age factor. But, you know, looking at it, I think he's only 20 or 21. So when I say mature age, you know, he's just a couple years ahead of some of these guys. And GWS have obviously seen his athletic just prowess as sort of a huge benefit here. I think I heard them talk afterwards saying that, you know, they were just going to choose essentially the best tall available at this pick because that's where they needed. And Leakley is a great option. I think he could play anywhere across, you know, that sort of tall positions, you know, key forward, ruckman, key back. I think he said he does his best work at key back, so we'll have to see kind of how he fits into this side, but I think he's a great pick and seems like a really mature guy from what I've heard in interviews. Next up was 16, and Brisbane went for Darcy Wilmot. This is another one that we did get right, so pretty happy with that. I suspected that, yeah, Brisbane would go for sort of a key defender. Darcy Wilmot seems like a great character. I think he had a really excellent video right after he got drafted, so definitely seek that out if you haven't seen it yet on the AFL app or wherever you watch the draft. Yeah, great pickup for Brisbane. I think that just continuing to strengthen that core. Then we had Tom Brown for Richmond. So yeah, this is another guy who kind of was in that midfield range. I personally thought this might be another chance for someone to pick up Matthew Johnson because they had been linked to him even at their really early pick. At pick 9, obviously they opted for Gibcus, but they've gone for Tom Brown with their second pick, so fair enough. I haven't seen a whole lot of him myself, but, you know, I knew that he was one of the names who could possibly be picked. Then we had Angus Sheldrick, someone again just not on my radar really in the top 20, so a couple of these guys late really bolting up the list, the likes of, you know, Josh Goder and Tyler Sonzi not even making this list. So a lot of these guys must offer something very particular to these teams, I'd imagine, because I don't think they're quite there in terms of like best available talent, so they must be maybe the best fit for the side. Then we had my side, Melbourne. Really happy that I got this one right, actually. Just thought it through logically. So Jacob Van Ruin is who we've chosen. Another WA kid. Obviously, I live in WA. So that's another really good bond for the Melbourne fans in WA. Having won the grand final here. Having had a core of sort of young WA players already, and now we have another one to the list. So that's great. Van Ruin's a kind of swing man who can kind of go forward and back. I think he's going to offer a lot of great versatility. That's why I thought we'd pick him, to be honest, because he can kind of offer goal threat and also offer sort of some relief maybe if Stephen May and Jake Lever sort of drop off and get injured during the season. So really good option. Keen to see him develop. And hopefully the Melbourne Football Club continues to look west for their young talent because it served us well so far. Then finally at pick 20 we had Kai Lohmann from Brisbane. So this is just another guy that just probably was at 35 for me, around that sort of territory. So Brisbane have obviously really liked him. They've seen that sort of maybe what he can offer at that kind of half medium forward area is going to give them something unique. And I respect it. Brisbane are probably have gone with names that maybe some people didn't expect, and I respect it, having 2 picks inside 20, and they've gone the outside options, I'd say. So yeah, that's their top 20. Sorry I didn't have any graphics or anything. I'll have to do something up and maybe discuss it in a bit more depth if people would be keen to see a video like that, and I can kind of bring up some photos and reference images and stuff. But I just really wanted to get on the live and have a chat with you guys and sort of just break down my initial thoughts on how it went. And just quickly to end off as well, so we have the second round of drafting tomorrow. I'll make another video for that. Really exciting because Freo have that first pick. And as we know, Matty Johnson is still on the board. One of the best players in WA, up and coming. So they could get 3 really talented WA players. So exciting times if you're Freo. But there's also Tyler Sonzi and Josh Goda, like I mentioned, still to come. Arlo Draper hasn't been picked up yet. Sam Butler. So a lot of really good players. I can definitely see maybe some trades happening for a few clubs, maybe trying to move up the order to see if maybe they can sneak some of these guys that they thought might have been gone initially. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. It's been a really fun night. I do love sort of drafts in sport. I think it's a really great way to sort of get the nation talking about these talents in a way that is very unique. And looking forward to seeing how round 2 plays out tomorrow.